Hey, thank you. Thanks for taking the time to join the show. Appreciate it.
No problem. Nice meeting
Cool.
you.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
No, I said nice meeting you.
Oh yeah, same here. Same here. Nice meeting you. Yeah. So let me just switch to gallery view here. So yeah, thank you. Thanks for taking the time. I know that's a nice background. So let's yeah. I remember reading a tweet a couple of days back from you about the smoke in Palo Alto. It reminded you of the smell in Bangalore, Shanghai, and the Ankara you grew up in. So
Yeah,
I was wondering how's the smoke situation in Palo Alto now?
it is still unbearable. I mean, the thing is, the way I grew up, I can go out and walk. I am a big walker, but
Uh-huh.
according to the index, it's 152, and it says unhealthy air quality. So I don't have permission to go out.
Oh, okay. Okay, sure. Yeah. Hope we get some showers and things improve. Yeah.
Yeah, we
Okay.
need showers. Yeah.
Sure. Cool. Hey, thanks again. So, just quick context, as we dive into this. So we invite engineering and technology leaders to come on and share their observations on engineering objectives, culture, organization, and systems. So that's the sort of on a high-level context. And in terms of as we talk through this, it will be helpful if we sort of use a couple of initiatives that you have worked on as an example to talk through, right? In terms of the background. Just to dive in, before we dive in, I wanted to take a few minutes for you to tell us a little bit about yourself and your background for the listeners.
Sure. So I was born and raised, grew up in Ankara, Turkey, and I went to school there, and I have background in mathematics and computer science, and I decided to drop out of PhD and started to work in the industry, and I had like about a year experience in the industry in Turkey, and right after the end of the first year. I was hired by Microsoft. Microsoft was doing international recruiting trips back then. This was after Windows 95 was shipped. So yeah, I'm that old. So and they were like quite keen about like Eastern Europe and Northern Africa, like Egypt and like the usual places in Eastern Europe and including Turkey. And with that recruiting trip, I ended up getting an offer from Microsoft, and I decided to move to Seattle from Ankara. And I spent about 16 years at Microsoft as an engineer, engineering manager, engineering leader. And I was always part of Windows engineering team, and mostly on the system side, mostly on the Windows Server side, lower level stuff relatively. And the last 3 years of that 16 years I spent in Windows Azure. I was in the first early Azure engineering team, like when it was less than 200 people. And that was quite an experience. And I spent about 3 years there. And after that, as a family, we decided to move to Bay Area, and I ended up at Oracle, and that was the time when Oracle was going through the cloud transformation as well. The Oracle
Mhm.
public cloud was still just in the talks. And I spent about a year in Oracle, and then I moved to VMware 6.5 years ago. And since then, I've been in like a couple of different roles in VMware. But at the core of it, like for the last about like 10 years, I've been spending like majority of my time on like engineering transformation and how to like strengthen your engineering culture. So that started with like me moving from like traditional Windows Server team to Azure, and how to make that mindset shift myself. And that taught me a lot, because I ended up realizing that I first need to change myself and transform myself before anybody else. So
Sure.
because of the cloud and the way the cloud engineering is done. And then I ended up using that experience in Oracle, and I've been using in VMware as well. And now, like I've been running a horizontal team across VMware that serves the entire engineering organization and actually across entire company on engineering services and everything that an engineer or anybody needs when they need anything about infrastructure. So it's a central team. It's called VMware Engineering Services.
Cool, cool. Thank you. Thanks, Hüseyin, for the context. That was pretty helpful. I actually recall watching a talk that you gave at the O'Reilly Velocity conference in 2015, where you talked about the engineering transformation at VMware, and I know it's been a journey. So in terms of things that have been going on at VMware. So I think that would be sort of helpful as a context as we talk through objectives, culture, organization, and systems. So in terms of specifically the journey that started, I guess, 5+ years back. Where would you say in terms of that journey itself, VMware is at? I know it's an ongoing journey, but since the talk that you gave at the Velocity conference, I also read 2 of your recent blogs, one that you wrote last year and one the year before. So I'm just curious in terms of your current assessment of where VMware is in that journey, and then we can jump into further details.
Yeah. Sure. Like you stated a few times, it is a journey and it's not something that you have a goalpost that you can go reach and just call it like touchdown. So that never happens. And that's in a way, like to me, that's the part I personally like. Some people get a little bit disappointed because they like to see a target and they like to reach that target and call it done. But cultural transformation is not something like that. Mm-hmm. So the goalpost keeps moving and that teaches everybody that like learning is something that never stops. So sure. As part of that, one thing that we wanted to like put extra emphasis is like this is a common problem in enterprise software. Like things might be different like for consumer space. Like I don't want to make that distinction, but like enterprise software has its own like traits that you need to pay like a lot of attention because of the criticality of the software that's going to run at customer sites. And the quality and reliability and resiliency of the product becomes super critical, especially like switch to cloud. You have much less room for issues. And actually, you can have issues and you expect the presence of the issues, but like your code should be able to like either self-heal or find a way to like recover as fast as possible, or you should have the systems and the tools in place to be able to have a very short MTTA, mean time to acknowledge the issue and mean time to resolve the issue. So as long as you have the tools and processes in place to be able to handle this, like you are going to be in good spot. But the software quality, even though it's a broad term, it is still like top of mind, like for the leaders and like the people who are selling the product. And one thing that was core to our transformation was like how we are going to ensure the better quality. So, and I've seen that in Windows releases like over and over again, like in late 90s, early 2000s, that the earlier belief was like if we test more and if we have more testers, the product is gonna have higher quality. Mm-hmm. So I've seen like test organizations like hundreds, like sometimes thousands of people. I'm not exaggerating. I've seen test organizations like thousands of people. And even though a lot of people on the manufacturing side has shown this like many times that quality is not an afterthought, cannot be an afterthought. And establishing the quality by inspection or later in the cycle is not really going to help you to deliver something that you may call high quality. Mm-hmm. And the mindset, the shift that we wanted to have, actually now like in the recent days, like this phrase became much more popular, like shift left type of thinking. So, and what we've been doing in VMware as well was making sure that like we invest more on prevention than detection.
Sure.
And for that, I'm not saying that we don't need people whose sole job is like quality, but those teams should be like really lightweight and constitute like small number of individuals who has like very particular skills around like software quality. And with that, we actually ended up eliminating the role and, in a way, the title that has the quality or quality assurance in it. And because one thing that we wanted to do is we wanted to make sure that like nobody thinks that quality is job of like certain set of people. So the key thing was to ensure that quality is everybody's business, and we have to find the problems from the beginning, actually prevent them. So we had this famous phrase, like when I first joined, my boss back then, Microsoft, was the CTO of VMware, and we had this phrase that became quite popular across the company called Dev owns quality. So actually in that talk, I was also talking about that. We wanted our developers to change their mindset from like thinking that somebody's going to test this and they may find it, to like, I'm not going to introduce the defect from the at the first place. And we actually needed to like spend a lot of time with people to explain them like what this means, which actually in a way means that like we expect your developers to be like more quality centric, and that means that less features. And in your conversations, the good thing is when you tell people that would you prefer like n features with mediocre quality versus n divided by 2 features with high quality, everybody like picks the latter. But when you let people to work, especially engineers, the tendency with gonna be to the forward. So people like to have like more features, and with that quality degrades. And the debate was like, yes, we are gonna have like low throughput. Is that okay? And we gave that comfort to the engineers that we are not after like more features, we are more after the quality. And we went through the traditional like change management phases that people had, the phase of like denial, rejection, and then we slowly went into like acceptance phase, and then people started to implement, and we started to see that it's becoming like part of the culture. So for this particular aspect, I can comfortably say that we made a lot of progress, and we are now like more of like a developer owns quality type of a company, and we are relying less on people whose job is exclusively quality. And we also eliminated the job function, which used to be called like sustained engineering. So which means like you deliver a product and another set of people in some other geography are gonna like deal with the n-1 version, and everybody is gonna, the rest of the team is gonna work for version n. So that was again another like traditional approach from 90s. We also eliminated that altogether. So we don't have people whose job is mainly like maintaining the old versions. So with that, I can comfortably say that like we made a lot of progress, but again, like this is not the type of the thing that we can call done. So it needs to become like a muscle memory, so that whenever we have new people, they also like hear and see like in action and do the same.
Sure. Thanks. Yeah, I think that's definitely helpful in terms of thinking about it. So when we talk about these 4 buckets that I mentioned earlier, right? The engineering objectives, the culture and values, and the organization and the systems, do you sort of have the notion of a set of documents which you use to sort of communicate and capture these across your teams, or is this I'm sure there are process documents for various things that you do, but I was more curious about the overall objectives for your teams. How do you sort of capture and communicate them to the team? I'm sure there are tools as well in various companies, but I was more interested in your philosophical view on how you approach engineering objectives.
I mean, one thing at the core of it is like I am I'm a big fan of like understanding like the movements and like the new approaches like in the industry. But in the meantime, I'm like a big opponent of like picking any model or method as is and trying to like implement for your organization. So with that, like I actually like after ended up moving to Bay Area, like so-called like Silicon Valley, I started to see more of like this like buzzword creation and like the fashionable movements and how it spreads to the rest of the world and how people just pick them like literally without not without thinking that like what this means to us and what means to this means to our culture.
Sure.
So the core thing that we do, like collectively, is to make sure that whatever we are picking up, we create VMware version of it because we have our own culture. It's not just the engineering culture; it's the overall culture, and we just adopt it in a way that like we would be able to tell that this is the way we do it, and it may not work for any other company because like as a living organism, like our culture, it is the one that works for us. And
Sure.
with that, we do have like tools and documentation in place. And the one of the key things that you hear in most companies is like how they approach to SDLC, the software development lifecycle. And sometimes they pick up like just like a publicly available one or a textbook one, and they combine that with a methodology like these days everybody like uses like waterfall as like a corrupt word, and instead like everybody talks about like agility, agile, and every single like phrase that's associated with agile, and every company, every team claims to be agile as well. So and the key thing, the key reminder that I do everyone like in the organization is in my talks and in my like just like uh, welcoming like new engineers is like how agility started, how agile started was like a 4 item manifesto with like 4 little bullets, and it was more about like software is becoming much more complicated, and the people interactions are becoming much more important. We value like running code more than like documentation, and the customer centricity, and also being able to adapt to changes as fast as possible. They just put this down and they just threw it out, and we ended up having an industry around this now
Right.
with all the jobs like certifications, coaches, masters, like owners. Like one thing that I personally am trying to push to is to make sure that we are not like just like following something as a fad. Instead, like there are like good things in agile. Like for example, like it talks about like customer centricity. It talks about like running code. Like some of these things like could be like combined with like other approaches like in the past. Like for example, like rapid prototyping was a common thing, and the name was not as fancy. And then there came like a design thinking. Design thinking also has like rapid prototyping at the heart of it. So we value all these things and we create our own version of these, and we put them in documents, and we had like one version of SDLC for on-premise products. And then with the shift to cloud and the SaaS, we realized that like the version that we have for the on-premise products, which has like much more traditional like steps and the things to pay attention, we started to spend like most of our energy like creating something almost exclusively for cloud, and it ended up becoming like sort of like this master document that we call it BOSS, and BOSS stands for Building and Operating SaaS, the BOSS, and the it like as a word it also sounds good because that's the boss for all of us. Like we just follow what the boss says, like the guide. And in that guide, like we started with like basic principles and architectural aspects of the software and the service, and then slowly it ended up becoming this master document for any SaaS project, any cloud project, from the inception all the way to production, including like all the legal and business aspects as well. So the thing is, like any other initiative, we start with a goal of like making sure that it's lightweight, it's easy to consume, and make sure that like people are not gonna freak out when they see it. So, but it is almost unavoidable to like create something like large that is much more comprehensive. And what you need to do is to make sure that like it is presented in a document management system in a way that if you are an engineer, you just exposed to the engineering parts. Like how you make sure that like you can achieve like 3 nines. What do we expect for business continuity? What do we expect for like API standards? And if you are like a go-to-market person, you should be able to filter out like what is for you, what is it in it for you, and be able to see those. Now, like we are trying to make sure that the final product, even though it's not final, that the current product is easy to consume by different disciplines. So, and that document has like all of our like key things, like how to announce a technical preview, how to announce a initial availability, how to announce a general availability, and that is combined with like other like small documents and tools that talks about like some of the basic things about how to make sure that your service is gonna be like designed in a way that like you're gonna able to achieve like 3 nines or 4 nines of availability, and that is combined with like other functions within VMware. Like we have an architectural committee that people go and present like before, even at the idea phase. These are like all like part of like, I would call it like a conveyor belt. And one thing that I always hear is like the new people or like people who are who haven't seen this like in VMware before, they may find it like a little bit scary. But one thing that I've seen like with the switch to cloud is, yes, it may look scary, but these are the things that we need because the cloud business is like, it requires much more rigor and discipline. And without that, you won't be able to like create an infrastructure like AWS, Azure, or GCP. And as VMware, like we have products that are running in all those clouds. We consider ourselves as the Switzerland of like public clouds by combining our existing products with all these public cloud offerings. And with that, we have no room for like an issue that may take people's service like many hours down. And that itself like enforces people to think like twice, if not 3 times before we do anything in production.
Sure.
Hence, we need all these documents and we need all these like principles and guides in place. And so far, they've been working out well. But again, like we've been mentioning repeatedly, it's also a journey. It's a living document. It keeps changing. And it's also like publicly available inside the company. Anybody can like provide feedback or make updates. It's almost like a Wikipedia inside the company.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's definitely helpful to know that you're using that as a framework for how you make and operate things within within VMware. So I want to spend a few minutes, Hüseyin, getting your thoughts on cultural values and elements. I know you talked about it briefly, and or sort of you've alluded to it. In your agile DevOps journey at VMware, you have talked about focus on time, focus on quality, and focus on agility. Sort of those are as values. And I also recall reading in one of your LinkedIn blog, posts about certain aspects of cultural elements that you believe in. For example, there's one around informal relationships among team members. That is something that you value versus sort of having formal relationships. Transparency within the team, focus on quality. We already talked about it. And then another item I recall reading is having the right balance of metrics and intuition, meaning not over focusing on metrics, because sometimes people can get crazy with metrics, right? So those were the areas I remember getting some of your views on those topics. But I wanted to just open it up in terms of for any engineering team that you've sort of built and led, what do you believe are things that are absolute requirements? And then depending on the context, there may be specific cultural requirements that may have to be built depending on the business context, but then there is a general base set of cultural values that you as a leader believe in. So I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah. No, it's a very important topic, and it looks like we did a lot of research on like stuff that I've been posting. So it is one of my passion, and I openly talk about it like inside the company or publicly in different platforms. And I believe that like no matter what we do, no matter what your job is, like we are all in people business. So even like if you watched like Elon Musk's launch yesterday or the demo yesterday, like even the core of that event was about recruiting. So, and he openly mentioned it, like, and he repeatedly asked every individual before they speak up, like, tell them like, what do you do and what is your name? So, and that was like quite interesting to see, like, even though like he was asking that, like repeatedly people were missing it. And no matter what you do, like how complicated technologically, and I also remember like the popular book by Yuval Noah Harari called the Homo Sapiens. In one part of the book, he talks about like individuals who are working on like some kind of a nuclear reactor, like some physicists, like even when they like are together, like outside of the work, they talk about like humanly things. They don't talk about like all the time about like science and like the particles and like the stuff that they do.
Sure.
So with that, like I actually like suggest everyone, managers or individual contributors, before they get into the business of like software or technology in general, to read the book called Peopleware. It is a book in it has 2 editions, and one of them is like late 80s. The other one is like a more recent, the improved edition. And even there, like it repeatedly talks about like every problem at the workplace, at the end of the day, if you go deep enough, it's a people problem. And in the industry, we all know that like the way we do interviews, the way we do hiring, we rarely have issues with people like intellectual horsepower. Like they are good in like technical stuff, they are good in like solving problems. And recently we started to put more emphasis on like behavioral aspects of the interview process, like, and this was something I experienced myself when I was in Microsoft. And the criticality of that is like you're trying to find out like what kind of a person is this, like who are we hiring? And I'm not a huge fan of like this notion called like cultural fit, because you might have heard that like the notion of cultural fit sometimes create like issues around like a lack of diversity. Right. And the thing is, it's a very sensitive measure, because cultural fit doesn't necessarily mean that we are going to hire like the next person who's identical to us. Actually, it should be the opposite. So it is more about like the values of that individual. If they are there, it is better if they are different. So it is better if the person is going to be complementary on the behavioral side. And with all these together, one thing that I tell every team member in my organizations is relationships are everything. So if you don't have relationships with your teammates, your like the next the neighbor team, or like the team in another organization, you cannot get things done. You will hit the wall one day, and you are going to need help from people, and you need to have the relations. And maybe it's also because like where I grew up, like the culture I grew up, like people are much more like relationship centric, and that's part of the life. And I try to replicate that at the workplace. One thing that I tell my teams is like when they first hear, it's somewhat of a shocker when they see like this in a slide, or when I the first time I tell them that we are not a family. And the thing is, there's this fine line, like anything else in life, that yes, relationships are important, but we have to make sure that we are not ending up becoming family, because family is a very different formation and very different thing compared to being a team. So if we are looking for a metaphor, if we are looking to mimic another organism when forming our teams, that is like sports teams. So just look for sports team and see like how sports team function. At the end of the day, they're all professionals, but they end up becoming like really close friends. And the best teams that you see do not you always have like all stars. Like best ones are the ones that has like the set of people coming together. There are a lot of studies on that as well. So these are like some of the foundational values and principles that I lay down when I take over a team or when I'm building a team from scratch. And the danger of like becoming a family is like the way I explain it is somewhat jokingly, like families, like by definition, are dysfunctional. So with the kids and the spouses and the way you operate, the other thing that I read in one HBR article was in a family, you may have like core purpose, like as a family together, but actually everybody in the family has a different purpose. Like the kids, they want to do something else. They have like other purpose, like, but in a team, you expect to have one purpose. And that also differentiates like team from a family. The other thing is the workplace, professional environment is a place that looks for business outcomes and results. And that is like the necessity, that's the core of like why that business exists. And because of that, you may end up having like making some very hard decisions. And those hard decisions get even harder if you ended up becoming a family. So because the core thing in the family is also unconditional love. Unconditional love like conflicts with like a business and like team type of like environments. So these are like some of the key things that I lay down. But in the meantime, like for example, in the COVID days, one thing that we repeatedly tell people is like the key thing that everyone has to ensure is to make sure that like your physical and mental health is top priority. If you don't have those, we are not going to be able to get anything from you. And the way we share this in our like check-in meetings is like the top priority is like in the plane, like take off, that they tell you that like you put the mask on yourself first. We tell the team that take care of yourself physically and mentally, take care of your family, and get involved with your community. And if you still have the energy, like do something for VMware. So in this order, because it is really hard to imagine like every like home environment and what people have been going through, and especially when the schools are on, and in different geographies, like the houses and the house setups are very different, and in some locations they are really small. So this is also part of our culture, not just for engineering in general, like around like people centricity. So we pay extra attention to this type of stuff to make sure that our people are like really like feeling comfortable, like just like doing their work, like especially on the mental health side. And combine that with like what we do at work is like one thing that we've been paying attention additionally is like psychological safety. So one example I can give you is like the notion of like post-mortems that we do after like incidents and like major issues that we have. So everybody knows the notion of like learn from your mistakes. So yes, like one thing that we repeatedly tell the teams are that is that there's no such thing as history repeats itself. History is not repeating itself. What is happening is we are not learning from our mistakes, and we keep repeatedly making the same mistakes. And with that, we create an environment for people to be able to comfortably come and tell their mistakes. this is what we have done, and it failed. And that's the reason we had this incident, which lasted like 76 minutes. And explain like what you're going to do, and then you leave the room, and nobody is going to judge you for that. But you will be judged if this issue keeps repeatedly happening. And when we do that, we actually, not for the post-mortem, but the readouts are done with the broader teams, like all the service teams, cloud services team across VMware, to come and tell like what really has happened, and with very openly, and so that you make it much cheaper for people to learn from other people's mistakes. So you don't have to wait for yourself to do the same mistake. Like, these are the things that we've been paying extra attention. And actually, I personally think that like these are like some of the critical things that makes VMware what VMware is today.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. Thanks. I think that's really, when you explain this post-mortem, the way sort of you have done it with the services teams, it reminded me of my time at Data Domain, where we used to call it CLA meetings, closed loop analysis meetings, where we would invite everybody to come and present. But yeah, that was really an excellent learning that I had during my time at Data Domain in terms of how to do CLAs the right way, because you can do CLAs in many different ways, and I think it's the leadership that makes sure you do it the right way. So thanks for sharing that. It's definitely sort of echoes with my past experience at Data Domain. So Hüseyin, I want to take a little bit of time on the sort of development aspect of things, meaning making things. Again, in the journey at VMware, you had talked about some of the challenges around having the engineers, think like a developer, right? So that I recall reading it in one of the blogs where you said one of the biggest challenge was having them think like a developer. So I just wanted to get your thoughts a little bit more in terms of what those challenges were and how you address them, right? So that the listeners can also learn from an experience that you've gone through.
So I believe that we in people in software, in high-tech industry, especially on the software side of the industry, are very blessed because we have tools and we have capabilities to be able to turn things into code so that we eliminate the mundane work. And that is the reason this industry has been so much shining, and that's the reason it's an industry that's paying well and getting a lot of attention. And the one thing that I see is even though this is the core of the thing, which is thinking like an engineer and converting things into code. So that is the maker mentality in software world. So, but even with that, a lot of technology companies, when you look at them, the number of people who are capable of doing that thing is not necessarily at the level that they are comparable to their overall size. So one thing that we see in many companies, because they are our customers and we go try to help them, because VMware has been in the IT space, helping companies IT departments. And we are now going into the developer side as well, with all the things happening on the cloud and Kubernetes side. But on the IT side, what we see is there's a lot of individuals technically savvy and they're really good. And they have the system thinking mindset. They can think about many products coming together and working seamlessly. They can design all these things, but when you ask them to write a small script or write some automation, they either can't do it or they don't have the passion to do that. Mm-hmm. So that is the reason I believe that we still have a lot of room in the technology companies to educate and train our people to become I'm not expecting them to become hardcore developers who are going to write a kernel level code or a filter driver one day. Because the coding, the development or developer today is very much different than what the developer was 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. because of the tools and the technological advancements, like today, you can get your infrastructure team or a networking team to spend some time to pick up like Ansible, for example, and write some Ansible scripts and to automate your network infrastructure. Or like learning like some of the more modern languages is much easier than going and becoming like competent in like C++. So one thing that we have been paying attention, and we've been sharing this with our customers, is try to not split your IT organization from your engineering organization, and make sure that like what you call IT actually owns very critical components for your company, especially if you are using your infrastructure to serve your customers as well, because your site is like serving customers to download bits. Your site is serving your customers to come and use like a marketplace, like to make purchases and all that kind of stuff. And these are mostly owned by your IT department, like some application developers or some like people who are trying to keep these environments up. And with like this thing, like this need actually evolved in Google in the early 2000s, and it actually gave us like what is called like today site reliability engineers. The reason we have SREs, the real SREs, are actually people who are capable of like writing solid code for infrastructure. So one thing that was common like back in that time, and even it's common now, is like most of like the people like at infrastructure level or like systems level, that backend people are not necessarily coders. And they hardly write any code, but they are great understanding how things are working together. So the teams, the companies that makes the leap to train their people to be able to like do automation are making like difference and actually making like a forward progress compared to other companies. There is this phrase for a reason like becoming so popular called infrastructure as code. So, and infrastructure as code combined with SRE is actually what you need. But when you do this, like any other new methodological changes that you are making in your organizations, you should not just go and like change the titles and start using these new labels. So when you are like taking an organization that's like working on infrastructure and you are converting them to like SREs, that conversion is not a title change. Title will ultimately change. Title is not the leading effort. Title should be the trailing effort. First, educate your people and make sure that like they are trained. And my experience is like these individuals are usually very smart. And if you take time and train them, they ended up becoming like individuals who can write code. I'm not calling them like hardcore developers, like as I said earlier, but they should be able to like write things that's gonna like eliminate the manual task. And these things have been like top of mind, like also in VMware, we have been like turning like our IT functions, IT infrastructure functions into engineering functions, and spending more time on like and putting more emphasis on coding. And like any other company, we have cases that we may end up like having like the premature like title changes, but we are like slowly like picking these up and cleaning up and going to the right direction. And again, like those individuals, like one thing that you see is like I have this slide that I show like in every presentation I have. Now, like I like to talk a little bit about the DevOps portion of it, because people oftentimes confuse like DevOps and SRE as well. Like one thing I tell people is SRE is a job. Like you are a site reliability engineer. You are essentially an engineer who writes code for the infrastructure and for maintaining the site as well, all the way up to observability, anything in between like these two things from bottom to top. And DevOps is an engineering culture. It's a way of doing engineering. And the reason we ended up having the notion of DevOps is because of the increase in the use of cloud and the cloud-based services. You needed to bring like operations, what we used to call operations back in the day, closer to the engineering team, because the job of operations back then was to like be the gatekeeper. So I remember like in my early days that there was a whiteboard that you go and write down like what is going in production, and people go put like you use like board marker and whiteboard, like it was like that like 20 years ago. Now like with the tools and like the approaches that we have, you need to bring all these teams together and make sure that like to be able to achieve that fast cadence, which is the core of like being able to deliver the cloud, fast cadence with higher quality and higher level of enterprise readiness, you need to have like those people working very closely and actually both sides picking each other's mindset. Ops people picking up the developer mindset, developers picking up ops mindset. A developer cannot push a code in production without thinking like potential implications to infrastructure, and vice versa. An operations person cannot do like infrastructure or operations without thinking the automation aspects of it. And when you start the journey of like creating this culture in your organization, you end up seeing that like the pushback from developers is like, oh, you are turning me into ops person, and I'm not going to do that. And if you are going to do that, I'm going to leave. So I actually, this dialogue is real. I heard this many times, and some of them really left, which is okay. And the ones who are remaining, a little bit like play the role of like being deniers, but ultimately when they see that this is real, they ended up becoming like assimilated as well. And but in the meantime, the challenge of like training your ops people on the automation side, on the development side, is not an easy undertaking either. So you have to be very intentional. You have to use like online training, or like the best thing that I've seen is like creating like a support environment inside your team so that people help each other. I've seen like people creating like work groups and getting together and doing coding and like doing exercises as teams and helping each other in that manner. And am I an optimist to think that like all of them are going to turn into like an engineers of that sort? No, not all of them are going to become like that. But the individuals who are like serious about it and intentional about it, like usually ends up like picking them up. And again, you're not expecting them to become like C++ programmers. You expect them to be able to write scripts. You expect them to be able to like use a PowerShell script, like just like leverage a commandlet to make some API calls and understand like what REST APIs are, how I can like just like make API calls. Like even that level of coding would be like huge game changer. So with that, like we think that like everybody in the org is an engineer, because sometimes like people come and tell me that like I'm not an engineer. I tell people that if you are solving a problem in a methodical way, and if you have a structure in place, you are engineering something. But we want you to be more efficient engineer. So it's not a question that if you are an engineer or not. You are an engineer, but you may not be efficient. So our job is to work together to fix that. So these are like some of the things that we've been doing. Like hopefully this answers your question. It's a little bit long, but
sure. No, definitely. I think it makes sense in terms of the challenges and how you've tried to get that developer mindset, across operations as well. So definitely, that's helpful. So the other thing as part of the research that I was doing on you and sort of the work that you've been doing, Hüseyin, was this initiative around the production readiness assessment program at VMware. So I was just curious about your take, because you talked about post-mortem. Can we call this as pre-mortem, for lack of a better term, in terms of how you look at the production readiness assessment program, and how far along in the journey you are with that, and your thoughts on that.
No, actually, it's a great catch. So it makes a lot of sense to call it pre-mortem, because like we don't want to have any casualties. So like to prevent that, like as part of our like cloud SDLC, we had a mechanism like this was in one of the blog posts I shared like late last year, talking about like how we do production readiness assessment. And all the large cloud companies have like similar processes. And again, this is the VMware version of it. And what we do is like we let every service team, like from the day of inception, that we have like all these tools in place, so that like it should not become an afterthought. We still sometimes see like some teams like learning about it later on, And when you don't know like the tools and frameworks like inside the company, and when you start like developing your service or your product or tool, and when you become aware of those frameworks later on, it may be quite a lot of like changes. And it is better to like get familiar, and that's the reason we tell people, we try to like educate people on this, and we have like brown bags, and we share them like across the company to ensure the level of awareness. So one thing that we use as a motto is there's no such thing as over communication. So just keep talking about it. And in production readiness assessment, we tell the services teams that like there are like 4 or 5 pillars that we look at, like all the way from like availability, resiliency, like compliance, security, performance, and all these aspects, like including business continuity, to make sure that like we are not really going into details of like the functionality of the service, because there are like so many services and we cannot become like experts in every service. But these core foundational components are pretty much common across like all the services. We like to make sure that like we follow the same principle, so that when we let a product or a service go for like initial availability, they can achieve certain level of availability in production. So if they're not meeting that, we work with them to see how we can mitigate it. And one interesting thing that we do, like this is again like a living document and living process. There are real human beings, they come together with the service engineering teams. And one thing that we wanted to make sure that this doesn't turn into an interrogation. So again, like this goes along with our notion of like psychological safety. In the beginning, there was that nervousness when we first started. People thought that like they're gonna go in a room, we sit like that was like pre-COVID time. This has been around like for some time, and everybody gets nervous like when somebody goes and questions like what they implemented. And again, relationships comes into picture. If people knows who we are, and if we have the credibility, if they know what we have done, it's much easier to bring them to table. And when they are at the table, like we make sure that the people on my side of the team that does the production readiness assessment use a very careful language in a very kind manner, that like people do not feel like they are being like questioned. And this is the human side of the approach. On the technical side of it, of course, like we look for like areas like if we are going to have like multiple availability zone support, so that we are going to have like high availability, or like stuff like the things that they may miss around like the compliance and all these basic stuff like that they may not thought about, like could be caught during that that process. And in the end, what we have done is, this came up like from one of the team members. Like I thought like this is a great idea, which is, instead of like us like grading the teams, like first of all we thought like, should we give them letter grades, should we give them like a grade out of 10? And again, like these are all like cultural aspects and how we are sensitive about ensuring that people are feeling comfortable. So some people may think that this is too much detail, but believe me, like they all help. And we said like for every attribute that we are rating, we are gonna use like Harvey balls. And we are gonna do like a 1/8 of an Harvey ball, like a granularity level. You may think that, oh, okay, like it might be like this is almost like a rating 1 to 8. But like when you use like a pie chart, like a Harvey ball, it is like a much lighter way to like show people like how we assess them. The next step was, how are we gonna rate them? Like, are we gonna go in a room like a jury and just tell them like this is how we rate it? We said, no, let's finish it, and let's finish the meeting and the event, the assessment, and let the service team go back and come for a debrief next day by assessing themselves. Actually, they rate themselves. And what we have done like few times is like, of course, like we do our own assessment as well, like just to compare notes. And interestingly, you see that like teams are, when you go with this approach, teams are getting harsher in general. They are harsher to themselves.
Interesting. More
So
self-critical.
yes, so that self-critical part was like very helpful. It was eye-opening, but it turned out to be a great thing. And after those ratings, if there are things that are rated relatively low but not critical, we give a signal that you guys can go to production for technical preview or initial availability or general availability, whatever that milestone is. And if they have issues, we in a way ask them to like mitigate it and mitigate them. And we work with them, we explain them how they can mitigate it. And for example, one thing that we've been very particular lately is like this whole notion of like scheduled maintenance. So we are trying to make sure that there's no such thing as scheduled maintenance. So we are in an era that like with multi-availability zone and everything, you should be able to like take one of your site down and upgrade and just do like a blue-green type of upgrades and just like do not take your service down entirely. So some people may say, oh, our customers are okay if we do this like Saturday 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. But the thing is, as a global company, like your Saturday 3 a.m. may be like the middle of the day for some other customer in some other location. Sure. And if they don't have like these basic stuff like the schedule maintenance or like if they have things that may hurt their ability to hit like 3 nines off the bat, like we repeatedly tell them like we have the budget of like 43 minutes, and if you are going to spend like this much time on this, your budget is going to be like cut by half. And there are times that we grant exception if it is like mitigatable. And if not, we ask the team to go back and work on it. And then they go back and like come up with a new date. And then they explain us like what they changed. And then with that, like we sign off and they go to production. And we don't do that. I don't want this to be perceived as like, oh, in VMware, like before you go to production, every little check-in, you go through this process. No, this is for major milestones and also for first time ever going to production. Otherwise, like there are like teams making like check-ins to production like many times a day. So this is like a more generic, broad process to be able to assess like architectural and the much broader, bigger picture structure of the service.
Cool, great, thank you, thanks, Hüseyin. Yeah, I think it is definitely a lot of learning for me personally in terms of how you folks have gone through this journey at VMware. As I said, although I'd read about what you have published and what you have talked about at the conferences, to me, I sort of heard things that were coming from the lion's mouth, and so it was definitely helpful to have the context behind the journey there. And it's interesting about your observation as well that this is a journey, and it's an ongoing journey. So I wish you and the team the best on the journey at VMware, and want to once again thank you for the time taken to come and share your thoughts.